He made no sound, neither barking nor pleading. Instead, he persistently appeared, day by day, with a limp, observing, and trailing one particular man with his quiet, intense gaze. Officer Nathan Cole was baffled as to why this stray German Shepherd puppy had singled him out from everyone else in a town populated by unfamiliar faces. Yet, concealed behind those eyes lay a secret, one that would draw Nathan into a puzzle he believed he had laid to rest indefinitely. What this puppy comprehended, the sights it had witnessed, and the path it would lead him on were destined to alter everything. This narrative explores trauma, the chance for redemption, and a connection so profound it reshapes destiny. These are narratives that touch upon the profound capacity for mutual healing between dogs and humans. Commenced like any typical late autumn patrol. Dried leaves were strewn across the fractured pavement. The wind whistled through desolate alleyways as Officer Nathan Cole clutched his coffee cup as if it were a lifeline, driving at a slow pace past the gas station on Harlan Street. The same shift, the familiar route, the usual quietude. Yet tonight, an element of difference was palpable. At the periphery of the lot, under the unsteady glow of a corroded lamppost, a puppy was seated. Diminutive, unkempt, trembling, yet unmistakably a German Shepherd mix, not exceeding 4 months of age, with one paw held slightly aloft, as if it had journeyed too far on a sharp object. Nathan decelerated his vehicle. The puppy neither recoiled nor barked. It simply stared. He exited the car. "Go on home, little fellow," he murmured, making a half-hearted shooing gesture with his hand. The puppy cocked its head. It wore no collar, bore no tags, showed no fear, merely watched. The following day it was present once more. The same location, the same gaze. When Nathan neared, it limped a few steps in his direction, its tail giving a single wag, but it remained silent. There was something about that quietness, that stillness, which pierced Nathan's chest in a manner he found inexplicable. He threw the puppy half of a granola bar and continued on his way. On the third day, he parked his car guided by instinct, his eyes already sweeping the shadowy areas. There it was, anticipating his arrival. This time, it followed him, matching his pace, its tail held low but still wagging. Its ears pricked at every utterance Nathan mumbled into his radio. He attempted to disregard it. Light-hearted remarks came through from dispatch. "Heard you've acquired a new partner, Cole." But Nathan's thoughts were elsewhere. A girl's name resonated in the recesses of his memory. Emily. He had not uttered her name in years. That evening, subsequent to his shift, Nathan tarried longer than he typically would. The puppy remained near. He refrained from feeding it this time. He simply observed it, studying the manner in which it limped yet never displayed pain, the way it consistently held his gaze without blinking first. It was not merely trailing him. It was guiding him. But to what destination? For what reason? Then, a peculiar event occurred. As he prepared to depart, the puppy trotted ahead, cast a look back, and then proceeded towards the boundary of the woods that adjoined the neighborhood. Its small form vanished among the trees, only to reappear, fix its gaze on him, and disappear once more. Nathan stood motionless, a sensation akin to something fracturing within him. Not alarm, not apprehension, but a feeling more profound, like sorrow intermingled with inquisitiveness. He took an initial step forward, then another, and in that manner, an odyssey commenced, not solely into the forest, but into the annals of his past, into anguish, and towards a newfound purpose. What was this canine attempting to reveal to him, and why did it possess the aura of destiny? The developments to come promised not merely a rescue, but a profound revelation. A course leading to the core of a mystery shrouded in silence, and a connection that held the potential to mend a fractured man. Nathan was uncertain of the force that impelled him onward. Rational thought urged him to retreat, to conclude his day, to return to the quiet emptiness of his home and a cold meal. Yet intuition, a more potent force, whispered insistently, the kind of whisper one senses rather than hears. And that puppy, small, injured, yet resolute, was already fading into the trees as if this were a familiar path, as if it knew its destination with certainty. The woods situated behind Harlan Street were not part of any standard patrol area. No emergency calls ever originated from that vicinity. It was simply an expanse of land, untamed, neglected, and largely overlooked, the sort of location where stories become lost and secrets remain interred. However, as Nathan moved beyond the final streetlight and into the encroaching shadows, his heart pounded as though he were entering something far greater than he could articulate. Dry branches snapped beneath his feet. The flashlight attached to his belt flickered, seemingly hesitant to accompany him on this journey. He halted, readjusted its beam, and detected the glint of minute paw prints in the mud just ahead. They were fresh, tracing an urgent zigzag pattern, as if the puppy had been running in circles, either searching or waiting, perhaps both. Then the initial trigger manifested, a memory he wished to avoid. Emily Clark, for years prior, had disappeared without a trace. 8 years of age, clad in a blue dress and pink sneakers, she was last observed near a park much like this one. Nathan had been the first officer to respond to that case, the one who had knocked on her mother's door, the one who had assured her they would find Emily, and the one who had sat with his head downcast when their efforts proved futile. Her case file was the one he kept concealed beneath others on his desk. Yet, guilt is not something one can simply bury. It persists. The puppy emitted a single, sharp bark, then fell silent. Nathan pushed the thought away and quickened his pace. The forest grew denser, and the pup darted forward, momentarily disappearing before re-emerging, always just beyond his grasp, consistently glancing back. Nathan clambered over a fallen tree and nearly stumbled on an object protruding from the earth. At first sight, it resembled refuse. But as he bent down, clearing away damp leaves and fragile twigs, the reality struck him with the force of a blow to his midsection. A discolored fabric strap, torn and encrusted with dirt, and at its extremity, precariously attached, a small plastic charm shaped like a sun. It was the precise charm Nathan recalled from Emily's backpack, as depicted in the report photographs. He stood transfixed. The atmosphere seemed to alter. This was no mere stroll through the woods. This was a clue, a communication. He grasped the strap as if it might vanish. He reported it, his voice faltering mid-sentence. Possible evidence. Requesting backup. Location. Woods behind Heron. I need a team. Yet, even as he relayed the coordinates, his gaze remained fixed on the puppy. It had now sat down, observing him motionless, as if its task were complete. But Nathan sensed otherwise. This was not the conclusion. It was the commencement, because sometimes the past does not announce its return politely. It dispatches a small, broken messenger that requires no words to cry out for assistance. And now, Nathan was not merely following a dog. He was pursuing an opportunity to find peace with a specter that had long deprived him of sleep. By the time the crime scene illumination cast its unsettling radiance across the forest floor, the woods no longer felt deserted. They seemed possessed, not by apparitions, but by recollections and instances that resisted remaining interred. Yellow tape undulated between trees like admonitory murmurs, and Nathan stood at the periphery of it all, his arms crossed tightly, his exhalations visible in the frigid night air. He had summoned reinforcements. Forensics personnel were present, yet none of it altered his unwavering focus on the puppy. It now rested beside him, curled into a compact ball at his feet, calm as though its duty was fulfilled. But Nathan understood this narrative was only just unfolding. He perched on the hood of his patrol car, attempting to decipher the tightness in his chest. That strap, that charm, that name, Emily. It had struck him like an unexpected blow, and now his thoughts were reeling. He had not spoken her name aloud for years, but tonight it resonated through every branch and shadow. Then a voice he had not heard in nearly as long reached him. Nathan. He turned. It was Sarah Blake, a social worker from that period. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray, but her eyes remained the same, incisive, compassionate, and weary from an excess of sorrowful sights. She approached deliberately, holding a tablet and a cup of steaming coffee she evidently knew he would decline. I heard about the fabric, she stated softly. Is it genuinely her case? They're conducting DNA analysis now, he answered, his voice then trailing off as her attention shifted to the dog. Is that the one who discovered it? He affirmed with a nod. She knelt slowly, her hand hesitating above the puppy's head. She used to sketch dogs, you know. She had an entire storybook about one she named Hero. She claimed he could sense sadness. The puppy raised its head, its eyes meeting hers, and just as she murmured, Hero, its ears twitched, a glimmer of acknowledgement as if it had been anticipating that very word. Nathan's throat constricted. You believe so? Sarah paused. I believe this dog was destined to find someone. A gentle sound of crunching gravel signified the veterinarian's arrival. She proceeded with exactitude, passing a microchip reader over the puppy's back. A beep sounded. Silence ensued. Then she read the information on the screen. Registered name, Bobby. Last listed address, a burned structure on Maple Creek Drive. Nathan's heart faltered. Maple Creek Drive was Emily's last known place of residence. The fire had consumed everything, or so it had been believed. Bobby was not merely a stray, he was a survivor of that inferno. And somehow, amidst all that devastation, he had carried something with him, a memory, a purpose, or perhaps simply an innate drive. Nathan looked down at the puppy Hero, Bobby, whatever its name might be, and an internal process of unraveling began. For this was no mere coincidence, it was a filament linking anguish to objective. And the further they traced it, the more they were poised to reveal. Yet one truth was undeniable, this dog had not simply encountered Nathan. It had been sent. And the paramount question was not who had trained it, but rather what or whom it was still endeavoring to rescue. The subsequent morning arrived not with sunlight, but with a dense, silent fog that clung to the trees like an omen. Nathan Cole stood on Maple Creek Drive before the remnants of the house registered to Bobby. It was now a ruin, merely a scorched framework. Charred timbers jutted skyward like fractured ribs, and the air carried a faint, lingering scent of old smoke, though the fire had occurred more than a year prior. The official report had deemed it an accident, probably due to defective wiring. No survivors had been located. But standing there now with the puppy Scout, Bobby, Hero, sniffing the ground beside him, Nathan felt a certainty in his core, someone had survived. He crouched near the side of the house where the back porch had once stood. It was then that he observed it, minute scratches on the wood of an outer beam, not caused by weathering, but by claws, by paws. The puppy commenced pacing in circles, emitting a soft whine, its tail lowered, ears alert. Nathan followed its direction. Behind the ruined structure, overgrown vegetation had attempted to obscure the traces of an old trail, a narrow footpath leading into the woods, insufficiently wide for a vehicle, unmarked, merely faint indentations in the earth. As if someone had traversed this route repeatedly. And someone had, because 20 feet further, Nathan discovered the first item, a child's glove, pink, faded, and torn at the fingertips. He required no further proof, this had not been left behind inadvertently. His heart pounded more intensely than it had in years. He radioed for assistance again, search teams, the K-9 division, drones if available. But he could not afford to wait. Not on this occasion. Not when that same sensation from 4 years ago resurfaced, that relentless ticking clock. That persistent inner voice whispering, you are already too late. Scout remained ahead of him, his nose close to the ground, navigating the broken trail as if it were etched into his memory. And as the trees enveloped them, Nathan noticed more clues, scattered and haunting, a half-full water bottle, a soiled blanket secured to a tree with a shoelace, and then, the most heart-wrenching discovery of all, a drawing. It had been placed inside a sandwich bag for protection from the rain, a crude depiction of a little girl, a woman with long hair, and a dog bearing a striking resemblance to Scout. Beneath it, in unsteady crayon lettering, me, Mommy, and Bobby. We're okay. Nathan's knees gave way. He sank to the ground right there in the dirt, his fingers trembling as he clutched the image to his chest. They had been out here, surviving, concealing themselves, perhaps from the world, perhaps from an individual, but they were real, and they were endeavoring to be found. Scout whimpered and nudged his leg, as if to communicate, our task is not yet complete. And Nathan nodded, whispering like a solemn promise, then we continue, because this was no longer solely about resolving a mystery. This was about rescuing someone who had waited far too long, someone who believed a small dog could find a hero and who might have been correct all along. By late afternoon, the atmosphere had undergone a transformation. What had commenced as a tranquil path into the woods now felt like a descent into something primeval and long forgotten. Each step forward seemed more laborious, as if the forest itself were jealously guarding its secrets. Nathan had trailed Scout through dense undergrowth, over exposed roots, and past fallen logs weathered by time, and every twist in the path only intensified the question looming in his mind. Who is still out here? Scout suddenly halted. No bark, no whine, just a profound stillness that conveyed more than any sound could. Nathan lifted his gaze and beheld it, a house barely discernible through the rampant vegetation consumed by vines and decay. Unlike the previous one, it was not burned but had been abandoned for a long time, the kind of place that ought to feel lifeless, yet somehow did not. As he drew nearer, the details became clearer: scratched paint, shattered windows, and a front door barricaded with planks, save for one that had been forced open. Inside, it was utterly dark, the kind of blackness that does not merely obstruct light but seems to devour it. Then he heard it, a sound so faint he initially mistook it for the wind, but it was not. It was a cry, a small, desperate, stifled sound. A child's sob. His heart leaped into his throat. Without conscious thought, Nathan pushed through the partially open door, Scout darting in beside him. Dust billowed into the air. Floorboards groaned underfoot. The sobbing ceased. Silence. Then a rustling sound from deeper within the house. Nathan advanced through the hallway, his flashlight beam erratically illuminating broken furniture and forgotten toys. A narrow flight of stairs led down to the basement. Scout was already at the top, pacing, his ears erect, his tail still. Nathan descended cautiously, each creak of the stairs heightening the tension in his muscles. The air in the basement was damp and oppressive. And then he saw her, in the furthest corner, behind an old dresser that had been pushed sideways, a little girl, curled up, her arms clutching a tattered pillow, grimy, emaciated, and trembling. She could not have been older than 6. Her face was streaked with dirt, her eyes wide with fear and bewilderment. And then Scout performed an extraordinary act. He walked directly to her without hesitation and lay down beside her, his nose gently touching her knee. No barking, no licking, no importuning, just his presence. She blinked, then slowly extended a hand and touched his head. Her breathing grew calmer. Her fingers entwined in his fur as if it were the sole anchor to reality. Nathan spoke in a low voice, "My name is Nathan. I'm a police officer. You're safe now. I promise." She did not reply, but she no longer cried. He radioed in the discovery, his voice unsteady. Child located, alive, in need of medical and emotional attention. As the dispatcher acknowledged, Nathan turned towards Scout. The pup was still observing her, like a guardian dispatched from some realm beyond comprehension. And then the realization struck him: this dog had not merely chanced upon his path. He had selected it. Selected him. Chosen to guide someone who had failed once before to ensure it would not recur. The little girl whispered something. Nathan leaned closer. "Is this Hero?" she inquired. Nathan looked at the dog, his throat constricting. "Yeah," he affirmed. "Yeah, I think he is. Because sometimes the genuine heroes are not those with badges or uniforms. They are the ones who never cease searching even when everyone else has given up." The sirens materialized like phantoms, dispelling the silence. Emergency medical technicians enveloped the girl in a blanket, their expressions taut with urgency yet softened by her delicate condition. She spoke little, merely clinging to Scout as if he were a combination of air and her own heartbeat. Nathan stood aside, observing the scene as if detached, as if peering into a life he could not reach. Something within him fractured as he watched her being carried out, not merely relief, nor disbelief, but something far more profound, something interred, something ancient. Scout remained at Nathan's feet, his tail lowered, ears alert, his gaze fixed on the ambulance as if he were safeguarding her with every fiber of his being. And Nathan simply stared, because that girl's face, her quiet fortitude, the unspoken terror in her eyes, it resonated in a place he had sealed off long ago. The past surged back unbidden, and the flashback assailed him, sharp, abrupt, merciless. Another house, another basement, a late call, much like this one. Except on that occasion he had arrived too late. A child discovered hours after the critical window had passed. The mother had left a note. The girl had succumbed to dehydration. Nathan had arrived just as they were closing the body bag. Her name was Bella, 6 years old. She had sketched a dog on the wall with a piece of charcoal before the end. And for years, that drawing had haunted him more than the silence. He never spoke of it, not to the department therapist, not to his partner, not even to himself. He had simply pushed it into a compartment in his heart and slammed it shut. But tonight, that compartment burst open. And the air that escaped was not cold, it was alive, agonizing, yet healing. Scout looked up at him, not wagging his tail, not whining, just looking with an apparent understanding. And in that instant, Nathan sank to his knees in the grass, right there in the clearing where the girl had been found. His breath caught, his hands clenched. And finally, at long last, his tears flowed, not solely for her, not just for Bella, but for every night since then when he had told himself he had not done enough. For every occasion he had passed a mirror and failed to recognize the man looking back. For every instance he had believed his badge had lost its significance. This little girl, she was alive. And it was not due to protocols or radios or procedures. It was because of a puppy who had refused to stop following, who had guided a broken man back into the tempest and shown him that some things, regardless of how lost, can be rediscovered. The paramedic approached. "Are you all right, officer?" Nathan nodded, roughly wiping his face. "No, but I will be." And that was the truth. Because sometimes healing does not arrive with answers. It comes with action, with second chances, with silent dogs and unforeseen missions. And in that moment, Nathan was not just a police officer again, he was complete. But this story was not yet concluded. Because what the girl had endured was merely one fragment of the puzzle, and Scout, he still had more to reveal. By the time the sun emerged through the treetops the following morning, Nathan had scarcely slept. His thoughts replayed continuously like a record caught in a groove, the girl's face, her whispered hero, and the manner in which Scout, this diminutive survivor with paws like compass needles, had known precisely where to venture. It no longer felt like mere instinct, it felt like a legacy. The girl's condition was stable. The hospital reported indications of mild dehydration and a few bruises, but nothing permanent. She had not spoken much. Trauma dictates its own recovery pace, but one name repeatedly escaped her lips between periods of sleep: Lucas. Nathan delved into the archives. There it was, one fire report, one fatality. Lucas Jennings, age 14, had died from smoke inhalation, listed as the older brother of Leah Jennings, the very Girl Scout had just rescued. But Lucas was more than just a brother. The deeper Nathan investigated, the more connections came to light. Lucas had been captivated by police dogs. He had even volunteered at a local shelter, the same shelter where Bobby had initially been registered. Lucas had commenced training him at home, creating makeshift obstacle courses and jotting down voice commands in notebooks. Nathan discovered old social media entries, Lucas beaming alongside a much younger version of Scout with captions such as "Meet the future K9 hero, Bobby the Brave." Everything fell into place. Lucas had not simply trained a dog, he had cultivated a guardian. And when the fire claimed his life, that dog had not fled. He had remembered. The veterinarian who had scanned Scout's microchip confirmed it as well. The address on record had not been updated in 2 years. It had been Lucas's idea to register him with the hope that one day Bobby might assist people just as genuine K9s do. The boy had harbored aspirations larger than the town that had become his final resting place. But perhaps, just perhaps, those aspirations had not perished in that fire. Nathan stared at the report, his heart thumping in his chest. Because now, it was not merely a tale of a lost puppy or a rescued girl, it was something far more extraordinary. Scout had waited, endured, and when the moment was opportune, he had not simply sought assistance. He had found a man burdened by his own specter, a man who required redemption just as profoundly as the girl needed rescue. Fate, perhaps, but it was more than that. It was the faith of a boy who believed in his dog, of a dog who refused to forget his family, and of a police officer who had finally recalled what it meant to fight for something beyond mere justice. Nathan closed the file and looked at Scout, who now lay asleep beside Leia's hospital bed, his tail twitching gently in a dream. He whispered, "You weren't just a good dog. You were his dog." And perhaps deep down, Scout had always understood that this was not about being saved, it was about saving someone else in the only manner he knew. But the concluding chapter was yet to unfold, because the heart that beats with the greatest strength is the one that understands how to give in return. And Scout was not yet finished. A fortnight elapsed. The leaves persisted in their descent, and the world continued its slow rotation as if it had not just been profoundly shaken by the smallest of heroes. Yet for Nathan, everything had been irrevocably altered. It was no longer solely about the girl or even the dog. It concerned the quiet recalibration of a life that had strayed from its course and the unforeseen manner in which it had been redirected. Leah Jennings remained under the supervision of social services, but the community had united in a way Nathan had not witnessed in years. Donations arrived in abundance. Local therapists volunteered their expertise. A retired elementary school teacher offered to provide tutoring. But more than anything, people inquired about the dog. Scout, formerly known as Bobby, still recognized by Leah as hero, transformed into a symbol not merely of fidelity but of endurance. He visited Leah daily, curling up at her feet as she gradually relearned how to smile. He never barked, never pleaded for attention, simply remained present, a grounding force, mending in his own quiet fashion. Nathan had initially maintained his reserve old habits die hard. But Sarah, the social worker, took him aside one afternoon with a single, incisive question: What if the story isn't just about second chances for them, Nathan? What if it's for you? 2. The ensuing silence conveyed more than either of them could have articulated with words. And that evening, Nathan completed the adoption forms, not for Leia, not yet, but for Scout. It felt almost like a ritual the moment the leash was transferred from the shelter volunteer's hand into Nathan's. Scout neither pulled nor whined, he simply looked up as if to convey, "It took you long enough." Nathan laughed, for the first time in weeks, not the boisterous laughter that fills a room, but the kind that swells within one's chest, a laugh accompanied by a lifted burden and a restored breath. And as the days unfolded, Scout became more than just a pet, he became a companion. Morning runs, tranquil evenings, patrols from the passenger seat of the cruiser, wherever Nathan journeyed, Scout was there, observing, listening, reminding him without uttering a sound that healing is not vociferous, it is patient, present, and persistent. Ultimately, the court sanctioned a long-term foster arrangement for Leia with a distinct trajectory towards full adoption. The foster parents who came forward were acquaintances of Sarah's, kind individuals who had experienced the loss of their own child years before and now perceived this as an opportunity for twofold healing. However, they were unwilling to separate Leia and Scout. Consequently, they put forth a courageous proposal. "Nathan, the foster father began, we want you to remain a part of her life. Not merely visits, but a genuine presence. Perhaps Scout resides with you but visits her daily. Perhaps you become something akin to family." Nathan did not respond immediately. He merely nodded because for the first time in a very long while, he no longer felt the need to suppress his tears. They were good tears, necessary ones, the kind that signified the completion of a cycle. That weekend, Nathan took Scout to the lake he had not frequented since the day Bella was found. He stood at the dock's edge, skipping stones across the placid water, Scout joyfully chasing every splash, behaving like a puppy once more. And then he did something unexpected, he smiled. Not the courteous, professional smile of a police officer nor the contrived smile for a photograph, but a genuine one. Because he now comprehended that this was not solely a narrative about rescue or redemption or even destiny. It was about a girl who had never relinquished hope, a boy who had trained a dog for a world he never had the chance to inhabit, and a police officer who had followed a puppy into the woods and emerged whole once more. For sometimes it requires only a single small paw print to guide you back to the individual you were always destined to become.